Game week 5 has been quite possibly the worst game week in the history of FPL. Most managers want to activate their wildcard, others want to sell Chilwell and Nicholas Jackson. In this video, I'm going to answer all of those questions alongside all of the other hot topics that have emerged from this weekend's football. So make sure you drop a like on the video and of course smash that subscribe button. I'm aiming for 10k before the game week 6 deadline. Please do consider hitting that subscribe button. So without further ado, let's get into today's video. Now, it's safe to say game week 5 was eventful. So what I've decided to do is wrap up 8 things that you may have missed from the weekend's football. So first up, Nicholas Jackson is only 1 yellow card away from a suspension. I know a lot of FPL managers want to sell him because he isn't actually putting the ball in the net, which is definitely a viable reason to do so. But another reason is going to be because if he gets a yellow card against Aston Villa in game week 6, he will be suspended for game week 7. So that isn't good news for Nicholas Jackson. Number 2. We know Julian Alvarez has been one of the best FPL assets in the game so far, but Pep after the game against West Ham claimed that Alvarez is almost undroppable. Now, this is Pep Guardiola we're talking about, a guy who lies through his teeth and rotates his team. However, Alvarez has played pretty much every minute in the Premier League and his performances have actually been fantastic. And although I don't necessarily think that Pep is telling the full truth here, this is really promising. And if he's saying this and Alvarez continues to get minutes, he literally has to be our #1 transfer going into game week 6 at home against Nottingham Forest. Number 3. Son was subbed early when Spurs were 1-0 down. Now, Son was one of the most bought players going into game week 5 and he did start as the number 9. However, Sheffield United were beating Spurs 1-0 and they decided to take Son off around the 79th minute for Richarlison. And we know the story. Richarlison got the equaliser and helped assist the winner in the game. Now, I'm not sat here saying that Richarlison is going to start the next game. I think Son is still perfectly fine. But it's worth noting, I don't like the fact that he ended up bringing off Son when he still needed a goal. So we need to remember that he could be a rotation risk later down the line. Number 4, Salah is now the 2nd highest scorer in midfielder. What were we thinking? Honestly, during pre-season, we spoke about how Salah was too expensive and all these other mid-price midfielders were the way to go. Just look at it. Mo Salah just continues to be one of the best players in the game. We should have just gone Haaland and Son to start the season and left it how it is, but we hadn't. So for those who have got Salah right now, happy days. If you don't have Salah, we need to start getting a strategy in place, and I have got a few thoughts later on in this video. Number 5. Raya started for Arsenal. Now, those that know, I'm not a huge Ramsdale fan. I think this was coming, this Raya situation. Is it going to be permanent? We do not have a Scooby-Doo. But at 4.8 million, if we do see consistency from Raya starting between the sticks, he needs to be an option for us in our FPL teams. But personally, because of the Champions League, because it is very fresh right now, Raya is not an FPL option, but one to monitor. Now, number 6, one that is a real problem for us is Ben Chilwell. Benched in game week 5 against Bournemouth, and Pochettino has said that it was because he wanted to integrate Mudryk into the side. So this isn't good news for Ben Chilwell owners. Is it time to sell? I think we are looking at those signs now, and I will be discussing best Ben Chilwell replacements later on in this video. Number 7, the Newcastle forwards are a problem. We are going to see constant rotation from them, and Isak right now is the most sold player going into game week 6. They have the start of their Champions League this midweek. God knows what that is going to mean for Champions League selection and Premier League selection. But personally, I think Isak is a complete avoid and Callum Wilson may well be so as well. And last up, number 8, as I said, Champions League football is back, and that also means Europa League and Europa Conference League. If we were in a situation right now where you can hold off on your transfers and your wildcard, I really recommend it because we're going to get so much information over the next 3 days based on team selections, potential injuries, and you really do need to hold off on those transfers. And we're going to talk about that more in a second. But those are the 8 things that you may have missed in game week 5. Let me know in the comments, is there anything else that I missed that should be on this list? Now, probably the biggest talking point coming out the back of game week 5 going into game week 6 is whether you should hit that wildcard button. Now, I get it. If your team has had a terrible game week, the wildcard gives you the ability to completely change your squad, bring in all the players that you've been looking at thinking, I really want that guy, and getting rid of all the dead wood like Chilwell, Nicholas Jackson and Bruno Fernandes, for example. Now, I'm going to try and be the voice of reason in here. Now, I'm not saying that the wildcard is a bad move in game week 6. I'm definitely not saying that because it's all team dependent. My advice is do not make any decisions right now. The reason being is we have Champions League, Europa League and Europa Conference League happening in midweek. And you can see all the teams that are involved on your screens here. So many of these teams we have huge ownership in. Now, the reason why, first and foremost, I hate the idea of an early transfer is because anything can happen midweek. Injuries could happen, rotation could happen. That means that the team that gets selected in the weekend games is going to be completely different. So for me, an early transfer is completely off the table. Now, in terms of a wildcard, if you do a wildcard right now, of course, you can adapt your team because you get unlimited free transfers. So whatever happens midweek, you can obviously be flexible with that wildcard. And I get it. Some teams out there are obviously in a really bad position and the wildcard is essential for their sides. But if you are a manager that is completely doing their wildcard because you're just knee-jerking off what happened in this game week, I really advise to not do it right now. Let the Champions League and the other European Cup competitions happen. Then get to get to the end of Thursday, maybe even Friday morning and reassess, look at your team and say to yourself, is this team still desperate for a wildcard? Because as I've said here, the information gained over these fixtures plus early Man City team news is going to be enough for us to do nothing right now in FPL. Now, what I mentioned about the Man City early news is that we have a 1:30 p.m. deadline on the Saturday with Man City kicking off at 3 p.m. We can almost be certain that we will get some team leaks regarding the Man City news. And that could be enough to dictate whether we make our free transfers really close to the deadline. For me, being a Nicholas Jackson owner, getting that slight news about Alvarez starting will be enough for me to sell Nicholas Jackson to buy him and vice versa. If Alvarez is benched, that would mean maybe holding on to Nicholas Jackson. So to conclude, yes, a wildcard might be essential for your team right now, but because of European Cup competition, I really urge you not doing anything right now and reassessing after Thursday evening, where we can come to a bit more of a conclusion on what to do with your teams. Now let's deep dive into some specific players that I know a lot of FPL managers are talking about selling right now, and no more so than Nicholas Jackson. So I get it. Nicholas Jackson has been a pain in our backside for the entire season so far. Only one goal scored, and that is against one of the worst teams in the league, Luton. Now, first up, I want to draw your attention to the underlying numbers of Nicholas Jackson so far this season. As we said, he's only scored one goal and he's played pretty much all minutes for Chelsea in the opening 5 game weeks. So that just simply isn't good enough for a 7.1 million forward. However, look at the underlying numbers here. He's had 18 shots in the 5 matches, 3 attempted assists, but the expected goals puts him as one of the biggest underperformers in the league. 4.1 XG, and he's only scored 1 goal. And you can also see in the expected FPL column, he is meant to have 29 FPL points and he only has 11. So for those that have owned Jackson, honestly, you can count yourself as being unlucky. He should have had so many more points than he actually has. So the big thing right now is he being unlucky or is he a bad finisher? And I think because he is new to the league, we can't really draw any conclusions right now. But for me, we're in a position right now with the fixtures coming up that we do need to start considering what to do with Jackson. Now, as I discussed previously, he is on 4 yellow cards. So in game week 6, if he is to get yellow carded against Aston Villa, he will miss the Fulham away game. Then they have Burnley away, followed by Arsenal and Brentford. So long term, I'm not even a fan of these fixtures coming up because Chelsea as a whole are struggling to put the ball in the net. Now, as I've mentioned here, are Chelsea a bad team? And I don't think they're necessarily a bad team because on the underlying numbers, they are 4th best for XG, which is expected goals at 10.64. And they are 4th best for expected goals conceded at 5.85. So I don't think Chelsea as a team are bad. They just have the exact same problem they had last year where they don't have a natural goal scorer in this team to put the ball in the net. Now, honestly, some of the big chances that Nicholas Jackson has missed, he would put in another day. The one that he missed in game week 4 where he scooped it over the bar, another day he puts that in the net. But in FPL, we don't have 6, 7, 8 game weeks to sit there hoping that he puts the ball in the net when we have cheaper options like Alvarez doing the job for us. Now, the other thing I want to discuss here is is Nicholas Jackson at risk of being dropped? Now, in the opening 5 game weeks, there was just no way of dropping him because there was no other alternatives in the game. However, Armando Broja is now fully training and we're expecting him to be in the squad for game week 6. Now, I'm not sitting here saying to you that Broja is going to start game week 6, but the minutes are starting to slowly creep down for Jackson, and I would not be surprised against Aston Villa if it's another cagey affair and Jackson is missing these big chances or not being involved at all in the game, that Broja will come off the bench and get some game time. And then we might see a consistent pattern here where Jackson starts, Broja comes off the bench until Broja maybe gets an opportunity to start for Chelsea, because we need to remember there is no European Cup football for Chelsea, which one thing is a good thing because they only have to prepare for the Premier League game each and every week. But it's also a bad thing because Pochettino has less time to bring players into the side. So the only time he can really give game time to players is in Premier League games. So I think this is all things adding up for maybe the time to sell Nicholas Jackson. And I've said here, should we sell him? I think it's team dependent, but with Alvarez being so good in terms of FPL value and having Nottingham Forest at home this game week, if we get information that Alvarez is going to be starting for Man City in the early team leagues, I think it is going to be incredibly hard to ignore Jackson to Alvarez as our 1 free transfer. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. But right now, even though his numbers are good and Chelsea's numbers are good, I think selling for Alvarez is the right move this week. Now, sticking on the theme of Chelsea, we need to talk about Ben Chilwell. A surprise benching in game week 5, but it's worth noting his minutes have been a little bit sporadic in the opening few game weeks with a couple of early substitutions. So all these things adding up, it isn't good news from an FPL perspective. Now, I've put a quote here from Mauricio Pochettino where he has mentioned why he was benched. And it basically is because he wanted to integrate Mudryk into the team. And for those that don't know, Chilwell has basically been playing as a left winger in this Chelsea system. So he can't have both Ben Chilwell and Mudryk playing as a left winger. And he opted for Mudryk in this situation, with Colwell basically playing as a left back. Now, does this mean that Chilwell is going to be benched each and every game week? I don't think so, because I do see a world where Chilwell plays as the left back, Chelsea revert back to a natural back four with Colwell, Thiago Silva and Gusto or Reece James, and Mudryk can operate as the left winger. So I don't think this is the end of Ben Chilwell as an FPL option by any stretch. I do think there will be times where he will get runs of games, but when we are considering FPL defenders, especially Ben Chilwell at 5.5 million, we simply can't own a player that we don't know each and every game week whether he is going to start. And especially in a team like Chelsea where they're really hard to predict what they're actually going to be doing with their systems and how they actually play as a team. So again, similar to the Jackson situation, I don't think it's desperate sell. But if you have your free transfers available, I think selling Ben Chilwell probably is a good option going into game week 6, especially being at home against Aston Villa, who I fully expect them to score against Chelsea. Now, I've put 3 replacements here. I'm just going to briefly cover these off for you. Matty Cash is my 3rd best replacement for Chilwell. His underlying numbers from an attacking perspective are fantastic. He could have got another goal in game week 5. And the way Aston Villa are playing right now really does cater towards Matty Cash being an attacking influence down that right flank. Now, of course, we have European Cup competition for Aston Villa. What will that do to Matty Cash's minutes? We don't know. But my assumption is that he's still a fantastic option for the long term because the fixtures are great for Aston Villa. And Unai Emery is a man who is used to adapting both league football and European Cup competitions. However, I still think the Newcastle defence is the route to go for. Defensively, the numbers are great for them. Botman at 4.5 million, I think, is a really good investment. That is the value pick in the Newcastle defence. Trippier is my number 1 pick if you have the funds available, because you probably need about $1 million in the bank to do Ben Chilwell up to him. Now, the one thing I would say about Newcastle is I'm a little bit worried about how thin they are from defensive coverage. Their Champions League group is a joke, and they're going to have to play their back four every single midweek. And the Newcastle fixtures in the Premier League are very good long term. So that does pose the question, could we see a situation where maybe Eddie Howe looks at it and thinks, I've got to play my best team against PSG, so maybe I give some game time to Lewis Hall in the Premier League, or maybe even Livramento at right back. Now, I don't want to insinuate that, I don't want to panic anybody, but I do think there is a possibility of that just because of the ridiculous Newcastle fixture schedule that they do have. So I'm still backing this as the best replacements, because I think over the next 5 game weeks, all of these 3 will probably do better than Ben Chilwell. But I would just tread carefully if you are going into the Newcastle defence. Keep an eye on midweek. If we see Shah or Botman get injured, we're looking at someone like Lascelles stepping in, and then that is a problem for the Newcastle defenders. Now, moving away from players that we need to sell, let's just talk about a guy that I cannot believe we ignored at the start of the season. Now, I say we because a lot of managers did go down the direction of not owning Mo Salah, but Mo Salah, I apologise. Why did I betray you? The guy is just the FPL GOAT. I know Haaland is breaking records right now, but Mo Salah just continues to be Mr. Consistent. Look at these underlying numbers here per 90 minutes. 0.57 XG per 90, shots 3.12 per 90, even expected assists is 0.58 per 90. Now, right now in game week 5, we're coming off the back of a Salah, I'm going to say haul on the basis of other players in game week 5 because they've been so lowly scoring. But he's actually been more of a chance creator in this Liverpool team. So I think that's why a lot of managers have said that Salah isn't essential, because he is providing opportunities for other players in the team. We saw that with the 2 assists in game week 5 in their fixture. But that isn't a reason to not consider Mo Salah in your teams, because the expected goals are still fantastic. And I know people are saying, yeah, but he's had a few penalties and that skewed the underlying numbers. But having penalties is not a bad thing in FPL. That only enhances the player as an FPL option. Now, looking at the fixtures for Liverpool, I think we've all pinpointed game week 9 is the time where everybody is going to own Mo Salah. Because look, Everton at home, Forest at home and Luton away. Like, if you don't have Mo Salah over that period, it could honestly destroy your FPL rank, because people are going to wildcard in game week 9 and everybody's going to be having an easy route to buy him. So Mo Salah is going to come into our teams regardless come game week 9. So the big question is, can we get him in early doors? West Ham at home, Tottenham away, Brighton away. On the face of it, aren't necessarily the best fixtures. But what I would say is this. Liverpool are finding a way right now, and I think they're clicking, and they're the only team that I feel confident about actually scoring goals week in, week out, and compared to the likes of Chelsea, for example. Now, West Ham at home, if that was away, that might be a trickier fixture, but I fancy them at home against West Ham. Tottenham defensively are not necessarily the most sound, and Brighton as well. Although Brighton might beat Liverpool, I don't look at Brighton and think, Liverpool are going to struggle to score that game. And then we come into game week 9. So the question is Salah essential for game week 6? Now, I don't think he's essential, because at 12.5 million, we need to understand that it is very difficult to bring him into our teams as a free transfer. And I really don't want people to be doing a -12. Let's say you were downgrading Fernandes to a 6.6. You were then upgrading another midfielder, downgrading a defender. I don't think he is that essential to be making multiple transfers. However, if you're in a luxury position right now where you're sat there over Bruno Fernandes, money in the bank, and maybe a cash cow in your team like a Ben Chilwell, and you could do Ben Chilwell down to a Botman, you could then upgrade Fernandes to Mo Salah, I would do it. I honestly would do it, because Mo Salah's ownership is just going to keep going up and up and up. If you can get on him in game week 6, the numbers are so good. And what I like about Mo Salah is you just know that he is going to play most minutes for Liverpool over this period, while the likes of Darwin Núñez, Jota, Diaz all are uncertainties. You know this guy is going to play week in, week out. And also, with Europa League football, I don't actually think Klopp needs to play his best team midweek, meaning that Mo Salah is most likely going to continue playing in these Premier League fixtures. Now, again, do not make early transfers, because we'll know the Liverpool system during midweek. We'll know the players that are playing, those that are not. But I think if you can get Mo Salah this game week, you do so. I currently am looking at a way of getting him in. But as I said, for a -8, it isn't worth doing so. I think you just try and make your team structure so that you can buy him later down the line, if not a wildcard. But let me know your thoughts in the comments, guys. Salah, just the FPL GOAT. Now, I know I told you guys not to use your wildcard chip right now, and I'm going to completely stick behind that. However, if you're in a position where you have activated your wildcard already, you went a little bit trigger happy, I've decided to build a game week 6 wildcard draft at the time of recording. Now, I will be doing an updated wildcard video on Wednesday or Thursday, so make sure you are subscribed to the channel, as that will be a bit more in-depth off the back of the Europa League, Champions League, Conference League games. But this is how it would look right now. Now, this team's valued around 100.9 million. It's worth noting, obviously, team value has been accumulated in other areas, so some people might be able to afford this team, others might not be able to. So, just covering off what I've gone for right now. Flecken and Areola, I think, are a really nice rotation. When Flecken has a bad game, Areola has a good game. And I like spending this amount on goalkeepers. I don't trust any other goalkeeper at 4 million. I don't think Matt Turner long-term is a good option. You could go to someone like a Pope at 5.5, but realistically, I think the value is probably in the defenders right now. So I like the rotation of these two goalkeepers here. Looking at the defenders, I've gone for the double Newcastle defence. Now, it's worth noting, if you have loads of money in the bank, I obviously prefer Trippier in this system, but I just couldn't squeeze him in this particular wildcard draft. I'm sure there is a way of doing it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, but I've gone for Fabian Schär of Botman, both bonus point magnets. They're brilliant picks, and the fixtures for Newcastle are great. So I think doubling down on the Newcastle defence is the way to go because the attack are so hard to predict right now. I've gone for a Stupinan. Now, the fixtures long-term for Brighton are a little bit tricky, and I'm also conscious that they are going to play their strongest team midweek in Europa League football. But for game week 6 at home against Bournemouth, that just feels like a game that you can't go without a Stupinan. So I think you have him for game week 6, and then you could sell him if you want to later down the line for a Matty Cash, which is a transfer opportunity for you. Udogie is just sticking in the team. You would bench him for the next 2, but he's good long-term in the side. And Kabore, just because they double in game week 7, it's an opportunity maybe to start him in that fixture. Now, moving into the midfield, the reason why anybody is wildcarding in a game week 6 is to have Mo Salah in their team. So obviously, that is a huge investment in the midfield at 12.5 million. And why we've had to make sacrifices in other areas like the defence. But as we discussed, if you are going in on a wildcard, Mo Salah is just absolutely an essential. Now, a player that I'm a little bit and ahhing about right now is Bukayo Saka. Now, I've put him in just because it's Bukayo Saka and it's Arsenal, but the fixtures aren't amazing for Arsenal, and Saka isn't necessarily lighting up the game right now. But I've put him in as a bit of a placeholder at 8.7 because I don't really like any of the other Arsenal assets right now. Martinelli going off injured, we don't really know the extent of that, and Odegaard just isn't really making me interested in the game. Maddison at 7.8 as well. Now, again, I don't think we can squeeze Son into this team if you are going for the Salah route, but I think Maddison is just one of those that is going to tick over nicely in that Spurs team, and I think he is a brilliant investment. And again, with no European football, this Spurs team can just focus tunnel vision on the Premier League, and I'm expecting them to consistently do well in this Ange team. And I've gone for the 2 mid-price midfielders who I think are the best right now. I think Eze is a good pickup, but Diaby looks great in this Aston Villa team. And also in Mbeumo, I know he blanked in game week 5, but on penalties, he is still a great investment in your teams, especially if you already own him. I don't think I would sell him with Everton at home in game week 6. And the front 3, Alvarez, as we discussed, I don't think you can go without him. As I said, we should get some Man City early team news. That could dictate the direction of your wildcard. If he isn't in it, then maybe we change that one. But Alvarez just looking unbelievable value at 6.8 million. Haaland essential. And I've gone for Carlton Morris as well. As we said, the double game week in game week 7 is favourable for Luton, but it is still Luton. Do I expect Morris to score? Maybe not. But I like the opportunity of having him for that double in game week 7, knowing that after that we can move away from him and downgrade him to Cameron Archer of Sheffield United. So that's how the game week 6 wildcard draft is looking. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Who am I missing? And last up, to wrap up today's video, I thought this would be a fun way to finish by laughing at my team. 29 points. Now, I still have Matt Turner to play, so that's why I'm holding off my transfer video until tomorrow. So make sure you're subscribed because I am going to be going in depth on how to rectify this team. But this is just a little bit of a preview for those that have stuck around to the end of this video. I basically needed a Matt Turner goal, assist, and clean sheet. So who knows, stranger things have happened, but 29 points and an overall rank of 772,000. Now, it's worth noting, game week 4, game week 4, I was 220,000. So I've had a 500,000 place red arrow. It's been a disaster, but the only saving grace is that I have 2 free transfers going into game week 6. I have Jackson problems, I have Chilwell problems, I have double Man United midfield problems. So I'm not going to go into depth on what I'm going to do here, but the likes of Alvarez, the likes of Trippier or Fabian Schär are on my radar. So as I said, make sure you subscribe because tomorrow morning I will be dropping my transfer plans for game week 6, and I am really going to go into detail on that. But again, Let me know, has anybody scored worse than 29 points in the comments? Yes, guys, okay, so that is going to wrap up today's video. I really hope that has answered some of the hot topics and questions that you've had going into game week 6. As always, if you enjoyed the video, please do consider smashing that like button. And if you want to join the journey this season, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We're aiming for 10K before that weekend's deadline. That just leaves us to say, have an amazing day, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Cheers.